Kyrie eleison, Kyrie eleison, Christe eleison, Christe eleison, Kyrie eleison, Kyrie eleison.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. It is actually the 12th of February, which makes it officially the birthday of Abraham Lincoln, our 16th President of the United States. And to honor both Mr. Lincoln and our country, and even to some extent ourselves, I've chosen an unusual topic for today, but I think that you would appreciate it. And the topic is honor. Now, we recognize from Mr. Lincoln that one of his nicknames was Honest Abe. That this tall, lanky person that suffered in latter life from depression, who always had self-doubts about himself, but yet, through perseverance and luck, he became, some would arguably say, our nation's greatest president. Now, there's always going to be a debate between him and Washington. Because, of course, George Washington is the father of our country. He led our country through a war and then was later elected as president of the United States. But I would say that you could arguably say that Lincoln was the greater president because, number one, Washington had did this before he became president, where Lincoln actually had to fight the Civil War. I think what leans the tally to Lincoln a little bit more was just because of the grotesqueness of the Civil War. It's been estimated that there were over 600,000 casualties on both sides during the American Civil War, where even in World War II, the United States only suffered 400,000. Now, to say 400,000 lives is less. No, every life is sacred and created by Almighty God, but that's not my point. Where George Washington founded the country, and yet there may have been times where it could have pulled apart, it didn't happen on his watch, but it certainly happened during the watch of Abraham Lincoln. And so the concept of honor really goes to the point of honor goes to character, and character goes to the man. So let's start with this. For those of you who have never seen it, few and far between, but of course, this was the statue that was designed for the Lincoln Memorial. It was actually, when it was designed, it was only designed to be 9 feet tall. But because when they built the building and came to understand how underwhelming this statue it was basically doubled. So that height of that statue is actually almost 20 feet tall. Now, there has been some consternation that when you look in the hands of Lincoln, is the hand positions actually mean anything? Well, according to some folks, it does. Because if you go and you use sign language to communicate with someone that needs that, it is actually sculpted into that the left is sculpted into the sign, which would be an A, and the right hand is sculpted to be that of an L. The other thing that it's a little bit unusual for this is the fact that he's sitting on a Roman throne. Now, this is a part of the memorial I have always kind of, I don't know, it's almost like an imperium. I mean, we fought to keep the nation free, okay? But yet we have him sitting on what would be a Roman throne. And the symbol of the bundled sticks, as we can see in the pillars that support the chair, were actually signs of imperial Rome. That the bundled sticks, or the fascia, I believe it's called, goes and gives greater support, right? There's greater support in numbers. Well, that's true. But that's the one thing about the memorial I never really cared for. Of course, the boot size is also a point of discussion. That if Abraham Lincoln was to suddenly come alive, I believe there was that movie, The Night at the Museum, where there's a scene, I think it's in the first one, where Lincoln suddenly comes alive and he actually walks out of the memorial for the first time. That boot size would actually be a size 19 for males, obviously. But then again, when you're almost 20 feet tall, I think it's comparable. So, what's probably even more important is not just the sculpture itself, but what's written above the sculpture. And we have another shot over here, and it simply says, "In this temple, as in the hearts of the people for whom he saved the Union, the memory of Abraham Lincoln is enshrined forever." Now, it's interesting to note that the Lincoln Memorial was actually dedicated, I believe, in 1923, that his eldest son, Robert Todd Lincoln, and the only Lincoln sibling that lived beyond 21. And it's just unfortunate, but as we look at that, but he was there. And it's interesting, Robert was also the witness at two other presidential assassinations, that of Garfield and McKinley. And that kind of hung over him. It's one thing to have your own dad assassinated, but to be there when the two other presidents were assassinated. Robert is actually buried, I believe, in Vermont, where he had a home. But it's just kind of very interesting. For those of you who don't know, the Lincoln Memorial is actually, when it was built, is set on pylons. And their actual number of stairs, if you start at the very bottom to get to the memorial, for those of you who remember in Lincoln's address, right, 407 years ago. Well, a score is 20. So it actually takes you 87 steps to get from the bottom to the Lincoln Memorial itself. I've always found that to be extremely, extremely interesting. My final portrait I'd like to pay tribute to our 16th president is simply this. For those of you who have ever seen this in physicality, congratulations. The reason why I say that is that this portrait of Lincoln is displayed in the White House. It is displayed in the state dining room. And it is a rather unique, shows Lincoln, I think, probably at his most positive, in the sense that although he did go and suffer from depression, or they called it melancholy back then, it shows him both alert and yet meditative, that there is clearly something on his mind, and yet he is not going to be overcome by that. And I think that that's a unique attribute of certainly this president that maybe we don't see a lot of. We see our presidents as men of action, but rarely do we see them as contemplative. And I think this is a private side of Lincoln, but yet being brought out. And I've always loved that. Maybe at some point when I get a chance to tour the White House, I will get a chance to see that in person. So as I said before, I wanted to talk about honor. Honor is a very important attribute that we really don't see a lot of nowadays, really. To be called a person of honor. Now, there's three separate attributes that we attribute to the word honor. So the first one is having a great respect for someone, or a feeling of pride resulting when that respect is shown to you. Okay, I am honored to meet you, sir or ma'am. Typically, as we say, your honor is what we use for judges. The second is being a person of good character, or a reputation for honesty and fair dealing. And I think that's something that clearly, as we said before, he was called Honest Abe. You don't get called Honest Abe by going and cheating your neighbors and your friends. And then the third one is a public award to show appreciation, right? She received the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the country's highest civilian honor. So from that standpoint, but what makes really an honorable person? Well, it's interesting that there are definitions for honor. In this case, over here from Homer, of men who have a sense of honor, more came through alive than slain. But for those who flee comes neither glory or the help. So, in the sense that if a person has lived an honorable life, and at the end of their life, it is usually recognized by the community, by the larger nation, and certainly by the family, that he was or she was an honorable person. But there are other definitions that I think that are equally insightful. For example, and I'm sorry these slides came out, for some sort of reason, the slides themselves are perfect, but when they brought over. One sense of honesty is one thing, that it does not grow old and loses places, but one is worn out with age is not, as the poet said, ask for money, but instead having the respect of other men. Again, I think that there's that expression that you can't buy class. You can have money, you can acquire money, but having money does not acquire class. I like this one over here, that honor may not win power, but it's certainly gains you respect. And it's a very interesting quote. And then finally over here, honor your father and your mother. Now, of course, that comes out of the Old Testament. It is the fourth command. But what is it meaning by honor? Well, you pay respect. Obviously, you listen to your parents when you are young, right? You honor them by doing what they ask of you. And obviously, I hope that it's never something that's illegal or immoral. But the whole point is that, and it's interesting because in the Bible it says, honor thy father and thy mother so that you yourself will have a long life. So there's a derivative benefit from being good. Now, are all parents good? I absolutely understand. I had a very difficult relationship with my own parents. I get it. It literally took me being on my father's deathbed, having 4 days to talk to him as he was suffering through the last ravages of lung cancer. It wasn't until then I get it. Yeah, he was a jerk. He was not loving. Okay? Trust me, if I had a chance to pick the greatest fantasy I think that every kid has is being able to pick. If you could pick your own parents, who would they be? Trust me, it would not have been my own parents. But unfortunately, like playing poker, you got to play the cards that you're dealt. And sometimes you're not dealt the best hands when it comes to parents. But, the revenge is that you try to be a better parent than your own parents were. And that's always a challenge. So when we come now to honor, what are we really trying to do? Well, in a very real sense, what we are trying to do is be a person of honor. And prior to that, I want to talk now about the Cadet Honor Code. Now, this was something that was very important in my life because it was a mandatory requirement for attending the United States Air Force Academy. Now, I'm going to go through the honor codes of each, and I'm going to show some differences between the codes. But aesthetically, they're the same, but they are different. West Point's, which is a sign of what this was, or this picture was, is very straightforward. A cadet will not lie. cheat or steal, nor tolerate those who do. Now, I think the original quote was, a cadet will not, the way that I learned it originally was, a cadet will not lie, cheat, or steal, nor tolerate anyone among us who does. I think they kind of changed it, but it was to reflect that you had 3 commitments placed on yourself immediately, and yet you had a commitment that was external to the community. So as you interacted with the community, and if you were made aware that someone else had violated, that you yourself were honor bound to bring that to the attention of the community. Now, in a very negative sense, some people would say that you're snitching on someone else. And unfortunately, there is that saying that's currently out there in the ether, snitches get stitches. In other words, if you're found out to be, quote unquote, a snitch, someone else is going to take care of you. And that's kind of the mutual assured destruction strategy that may be found in some communities. I don't believe in it, but in the sense of that. But the fact of the matter is that this was, and it's to some extent, I mean, if you can go and equate this to, the 10 Commandments, certainly in the 10 Commandments, there's a commandment: you won't lie, right? You don't steal, right? You don't cheat, which is a form of stealing, but it negatively impacts the community. As we've found, if a person is underqualified or cheated on an application or something, and then when they're put to the test, when they need to display those skills, and in actuality they don't have those skills, and someone dies as a result of that, well, as they say down south, somebody's got some splaining to do. So what I want to do now is look in terms of that. So why is that important? I'm sorry, I'm getting really fudgy with my slides today. You'll have to forgive me. This is the statue of Douglas MacArthur at West Point. And Douglas MacArthur was not only a graduate of West Point, I think he graduated in the class of 1903. Douglas MacArthur at that time had a near perfect academic record. He had an overall percentage of, I believe it was 98.3% on a scale of 100%. He had no demerits while he was at West Point. And as a result of that, was selected as the first captain, which is the Cadet Corps commander. He would later go on to come back to the academy as a superintendent, and as superintendent did a great deal of reform for the academy, revised its whole curriculum, constituted the philosophy that every cadet was both a student and an athlete. So regardless, just because you didn't play varsity football didn't mean you didn't do something. And as a result of that, instituted the honor code as well. Now, Douglas MacArthur was hazed at West Point because of his father, General Arthur MacArthur, who had won the Congressional Medal of Honor at 19 years old during the Civil War. But yet, during a hazing scandal, MacArthur was asked specifically who hazed him. And in a very crafted message, he would only go and state the names of those cadets that had already been expelled. He never testified about any cadet that remained. And as a result of that, evidently gained the respect of his peers. Now, to say, again, it goes back to the toleration, because theoretically he broke the honor code in the sense that, but then again, they didn't have an honor code when he was a cadet. But if you place that circumstance now in the very context of the code that he instituted, he should have named names, because that was part of the code. If you had cadets that were still hazing others and you knew about it, and for those of you who don't know what hazing is that basically you put people in either a physically or psychologically distressing position or both. Like, for example, Hayes was, numerous ones, but I mean, basically it was just meant to terrorize the hell out of them, right? It was the upperclassmen Hayes the fourth year students known as plebes, based on the term plebe and the term of ancient Greece, and that they didn't get the respect of anyone until they themselves became upperclassmen. But MacArthur was responsible for instituting that, and as a result of that, that is one of the few things of West Point that's actually carried over to the other service academies, and I'll show you that in a minute. So over here, what we see is the honor code for the Naval Academy. Now, if you'll see the bottom bolded, right? They do not lie. In midshipmen, right, which you are a part of, you don't lie, you don't cheat, and you don't steal. But there's nothing about tolerating other people that you have knowledge about that. Now, again, each service academy is different. Each service academy is bound by their own code of ethics. But it is interesting to see that. Over here, this is the honor code for the Coast Guard Academy. Over here. So it simply goes and says, over here, that as Coast Guard cadets, that they have a special trust. Absolutely. So from that standpoint, now it's interesting because it says that it is a concept of honor and not a code. That's a very interesting nuance, I guess, for lack of a better term. But the fact of the matter is that you have to be dependable. So it just simply says that you'll not lie, cheat, or steal, nor attempt to deceive. Again, those are all personal items, but there's no unifying measure with respect to community. Okay. So let's go back over here. I'm sorry. Okay, this is the one for the Merchant Marines. And it just simply says a midshipman will not lie, cheat, or steal. Period. End of statement. That's it. Again, there's no deriving of honor for community. And then finally, over here, now I did have I'm sorry, let me go back one because I did have a slide for the Air Force Academy. Okay, here we go. Now, hold on, let me get rid of this. All right. Now, it's interesting, right? Because the Air Force Academy goes back, again, going back to my wording as I remember, that was actually the Air Force Academy. But the whole point is simply this, is that we will not, again, community, not individual, we will not lie, cheat, or steal, nor tolerate anyone among us who does. Okay, again, going back to West Point's, over here, Albert, come on. Right, a cadet. That's the main difference in the concept of honor, whereas West Point focuses the concept of honor on the individual person. We at the Air Force Academy, of course, do things differently because it is we will not tolerate. Now, it doesn't absolve it from the individual sense of responsibility, but it's interesting that the Air Force Academy extends that concept throughout the community right up front. And I always found it very different in terms of that. But again, it is what it is. So, what are we trying to get at? Well, the concept of honor also gets extended to other outside, and this is a slide I found as far as other institutions currently as far as having an honor code. Okay? But the fact of the matter is that one cannot specifically say that there is more cheating at a civilian university as opposed to the service academies. The service academies get rocked by scandals because they're public institutions. And when I was there, we had a huge scandal. I think over 80 cadets, if I remember, were charged. I don't know how many actually got expelled, but there were a significant amount that ended up leaving. But the point that I want to make was there was a recent event at the Air Force Academy, and I'm going to be very vague about this, but a cadet, I believe he was a fourth classman, had made a significant allegation about racism. And unfortunately, of course, now in this times of, I think we're kind of pulling back from the whole wokeness concept. But the fact of the matter is if to accuse someone of being racist, that's a pretty big deal. I mean, that ranks up there with accusing someone of sexual harassment, being, maybe unfaithful in a relationship, whatever. But the challenge is that this person made their opinion public, and the academy had to respond. And although he is no longer there, but Lieutenant General Sylvia, I believe his name is, he's currently now the president of the University of Arkansas, just recently installed there. A great person, from what I understand, a person very high integrity. Well, he was a lieutenant general, so he's a 3-star general, but he was superintendent. Well, basically, he called the entire cadet wing, and the only place that you can do that is in our dining hall. And the story, as it's been told to me, is that he basically said, and it was captured in the news because that's how I caught it, was that if someone is going to accuse someone of being a racist was certainly not a United States Air Force value. And if you displayed that tendencies or had expressed that point of view publicly, you did not deserve to be at the United States Air Force Academy. Well, come to find out, as the story got played out, there was no racism involved. That this student was actually being tossed out on academics. And for whatever reason, he felt compelled to make that statement. I'm sure if you go on Google and put on Air Force Academy, racist comments, I'm sure you can find the story. But the whole point is that, was that an honorable thing to do? No, it was not. It's never honorable to go and to put forward a accusation or a circumstance or whatever, and then truth be told, there's a very famous story back, I believe, in the Nixon administration, where now Richard Nixon had no great love affair with the press, but outside of I think Henry Kissinger was the only person that had this great relationship with the press, and it really kind of irked Nixon, so much to the point that Nixon decided to go and put some attention on Kissinger, and come to find out that Kissinger had been leaking certain stories that were also, favorable to Henry Kissinger. I mean, Henry Kissinger was the type of person that would not turn down a New York cocktail party if invited. He held himself in such high esteem. But the whole point is that Kissinger violated the president's trust by leaking. And he was leaking to make himself look better than Nixon. Well, unfortunately, this one cabinet official was being trolled, for lack of a better term. And in doing so, it was found out later on he was not guilty of what he was being charged with. And he had a press conference, and basically said, so, guys, where do I go to get my reputation back? Because that was a very powerful statement. It's one thing to go, think of it this way. Let's say you had, something that's very valuable to me is my Air Force Academy class ring, okay? I haven't worn it in a while, but I still have it. It's in my jewelry box, and occasionally I will wear it. Well, let's say I invite you over to my house, and I'm distracted. I go to the bathroom or something, and you somehow figure your way out, go into my bedroom, and the ring is right there, let's say on the top of my night table. So you go in there and you swipe the ring. Now, maybe a couple of days go by, and then I notice, where's my ring? Yeah, I had it over here. And the last time I saw it was just before I invited you. So the good detective that I am, I go and I'm never going to go and call you on this. I'm going to meet you face to face. Oh, by the way, I discovered something, and I was just wondering if you might have any knowledge about it. You know my class ring from the Air Force Academy? Well, it turned up missing, and the last time I saw it, it was on my nightstand before you came over to my house for dinner. And I haven't had anyone else at my house, and certainly not in my bedroom, since then. Well, are you accusing me? Well, maybe accuse is a little strong, but do I have knowledge? Or do you have knowledge that I should know something about this? And then let's say you capitulate, then your morality comes back, and you go into your pocket and you give me back my ring. Well, thank you. It's not damaged. Put it on my finger. Now, are we right between? No. No, 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 no. It will be a cold day in hell before I ever invite you into my house ever again. But thank you for returning my ring. I appreciate that. But let's talk about one's reputation. If you do something to deliberately impact on someone's reputation, I think that's a different story. Because unfortunately with reputations, even if this person had gone and said, yes, I messed up, I said it out of anger, I should have known better, I'm sorry. Okay. But the problem is that you've created a situation that going forward, people are going to enjoy it, whether you like it or not. Just like I'm never going to look at you with the same set of eyes after you stole my class ring. I'm not going to look at someone else that accuses me of something that I was cleared of by competent legal authority. You're never going to look at me the same way. I'm sorry. That's the way we are as humans. Now, if we were in heaven, first of all, we wouldn't be stealing from each other. But if we had perfect, mercy and perfect knowledge, we could restore that relationship back to what it was before. But in our fallen state, because we interact as human beings, we don't have that capacity. That capacity can only come from God. Okay? But the fact of the matter is that one's reputation is a sense of honor. We carry that as a badge of honor. If someone goes and says, I have a great friend, his name is Ken. Ken has known me since 1992. So, what is it? 92, 2002, 2012, 2022, 23, 24, 25. So he's known me for 33 years. 3 years. Okay. This person has been so important not only in my life, but in the life of my family. The way that I would describe him on a reference call would be this. Now, I've used this example for someone else, but this is the way that I would justify a reputation. If someone said, "By your friend Ken, how would you describe him?" I describe him as this. I could give my friend Ken my wallet, my wife, my family, and my house, and go away for 10 years, and then come back in 10 years and know that nothing evil has happened to my wife, my kids, my family, or my house. That's how much I trust my Ken friend, or my friend Ken. Okay? How many of us would be worthy of such high regard? Well, I'd like to think that I could be that person. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. Maybe I'll have to ask some of my friends. But my whole point is this. Without integrity, you have no honor. You know, this whole thing about disrespect, the concept of disrespect, is really kind of daunting, because the old adage is, if you want to get respect, you must give respect. Now, I live outside of Atlanta, Georgia. I'm 64 years old. I know I hate reiterating that, but just work with me, okay? If I am interacting with a man, a younger man, let's say he's 21, okay? He's working on one of my project teams. He's a young guy, fresh out of college. If we're on a conference call and, he was responsible for some deliverable, so let's call him Dave, right? So Dave is my 21-year-old, nice kid, right? Enthusiastic, a little rough around the edges, but, you can work with that. But, let's say he's a coder. Coders are like that. They really are. A little rough around the edges, but basically nice people. Just, you just kind of have to get out of their way, let them do their thing, and then you just only circle back when it's done. So Dave is my coder. Dave, this is Al. Thanks for being on the call. Dave, you're in the lead-in position, so you had a deliverable that you were going to deliver and quality test 3 modules of code, and I need to know, where are we on that? Al, all 3 of them got done. We quality tested the other one. We're right now writing up the documentation, but we have entered it into the system as being complete. Dave, thank you, sir. Appreciate the effort. I just call the 21-year-old sir. I'm 64. Now, people would say, well, that's outrageous. I mean, no, it's not. It's not. Because down south, we go and we call people sir. Now, I know some people they're really, oh man, I cannot tell you how many times. But you know what? If a person is going to get so hot and bothered that I call them sir or ma'am, I'm going to call you sir or ma'am. Sorry. That's on you. It's not on me. So if I'm going and holding open a door, this is a real classic too. This actually happened to me once, where this woman was so laying down, and I opened up the door and said, "Good morning, ma'am. How are you?" "I'm not a ma'am." Okay. Door's still open. Still holding it for you. She walked through, and I'm thinking, okay, I'll give her some grace, But the whole thing, we get wrapped around the axle around so many stupid things. Just, I hate to use the word just take it, but just receive it in the manner that it was given to you. It was a sign of respect. Okay? We are in the South. That's the way things are done. I have people that call me sir, and they may be younger, they may be older. No big deal. It's just a sign of respect. And especially if you've forgotten their name, it's a good way out. Thanks, sir. Appreciate it. But it's just I think that on our way for us to be more honorable and more civil, let's just go and loosen up a little bit and just accept the fact that if you want people to be nice to you, let them be nice to you. Don't fight them over that. Now, if you're getting mugged, yeah, you fight like hell. But if someone's holding the door for you, for the love of Pete, just let them hold the door and just say thank you. You don't have to want to add sir, ma'am. That's your choice. I'm going to do it. Thanks, sir. Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate it. That's it. So, again, I want to end this conversation about honor, but again, in honor of our 16th president, it's just amazed that every time I had a chance in 2018 to walk into the Lincoln Memorial, and for those of you who don't know, it is actually patterned on the Parthenon in Athens, and it was actually built and completed before the Jefferson Memorial. We spoke about the Jefferson Memorial in another episode, but my point is that to think that of all the pressure that he was under, his wife, Mary Todd, was not well. She was an extremely ambitious woman. She pushed him hard. I mean, hard. But as a result of that, he did become president of the United States. And as a matter of fact, if you watch the movie Lincoln, that was done, there's a scene where they're having a reception. Now, Lincoln hated the fancy stuff of the presidency. And, of course, Mary Todd Lincoln, she relished in that. She probably did the first major White House rehab because she was actually called before Congress because of the amount of money that she spent. Now, she justified it because the House was just almost to the point of ruin. So she did a lot of things to bring it up to speed, as it were. But, of course, people in Congress, and, of course, there was a war going on, which didn't help things either. But the whole point was that there is a reception for Congress. And, of course, when you meet the president, the proper title is Mr. President. Well, Mary Todd Lincoln thought that she should be addressed instead of Mrs. Lincoln, because the title of First Lady, although it was starting to emerge, she took exception to that and wanted to be called Madam President. Well, her husband was elected to the presidency, but not her. But, again, unfortunately, as a result of seeing, it's interesting that she and Jackie Kennedy, there's always a lot of comparisons between the Kennedy assassination and Lincoln assassination. The whole thing, both Lincoln and Kennedy have got 7 letters in their name, that Lincoln's secretary was called Kennedy and Kennedy's secretary was called Mrs. Lincoln. All these things that they tie in together. Both of them had a VP by the name of Johnson, etc. Both VPs were Southern. So again, but long story short, the tragedy is that both women were so near to each other's husband when they got assassinated. I mean, Lincoln and Mrs. Lincoln were at Ford's Theater. They were sitting together. John Wilkes Booth fires the Derringer into the left side. But, I mean, Mary Todd Lincoln is there. She sees the result of her husband and, as a result, becomes hysterical. Well, Jackie Kennedy is in the limo with Jack. Jack gets his head blown off. And although Jackie did not publicly display her hysteria, but Jackie was said to have suffered from post-traumatic stress for years as a result of that. Well, no kidding. Who wouldn't? Your husband's brain was splattered in front of you in real time. How do you reconcile that? So, again, to drive back to the concept of honor was that both women in their grief tried to be honorable. to the nation. Mary Todd did not go to any of the public displays of grief in Washington. Matter of fact, I don't believe that she even traveled on the train with his body. It was said that she left the White House 2 weeks later, and of course, Lincoln made that long pilgrimage back through the nation before he was buried back in Springfield at, was it Oakfield or Oakcrest, where he's buried. But the whole point is that this president, who was thrust in such disillusionment and mayhem and, which war brings, and yet somehow he held himself together. And it was unfortunate that as a result of his assassination, he could not see the fruits of what resulted by going and ending slavery in the United States. We can play what if games all day long. What if Lincoln had lived? What if Kennedy had lived, etc. Those are called, intellectual exercises. But on this day, let us try to remember that this lanky man, born in Kentucky, self-educated for the most part, eventually got himself elected as the 16th President of the United States. And with the honor of that office, truly transformed the United States and set into motion the country that we now live in. Abraham Lincoln does live in that temple, but he should be living in our hearts because he lived a very honorable life and was denied an honorable death. But yet, even in death, do we remember John Wilkes Booth? Yeah, maybe as a historical footnote, but trust me, there are no memorials for John Wilkes Booth. So today, folks, thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll talk to you real soon.